Welcome to Mac Voices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. We've got Neil Ticktin on the line of MacTech to talk about a number of interesting developments and things that have happened. Neil, it's great to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure, Chuck.
Yeah, Neil, I was kind of doing the math. I think the last time we talked was a year ago, which doesn't even seem possible. And so much has happened since then, and we'll get to one of those things a little later in the show, the MacTech BootCamps.
Yeah.
But the first thing I guess we want to talk about is some virtualization news.
Yeah. So one of the things that MacTech is well known for is these definitive benchmarks that we do from time to time, sometimes on things like virtualization, sometimes it might be on like Microsoft Office, other times it might be on some other things. In fact, we've got some more going on that we're looking at right now to see if we can do. But most recently, we published this extensive article on virtualization benchmarks, and part of it was about how different solutions perform. So VMware Fusion versus Parallels Desktop, and that's version 5 of Fusion and 8 of Parallels Desktop. But then also we got into other things like what's the best Mac to run virtualization with? How might you enhance that virtualization experience overall from a speed point of view, regardless of the solution you're looking at? And it was pretty telling. And at the end of the day, we had done literally thousands, probably 3,000-4,000 or so tests, many of which with a stopwatch, just because that's the only way you get a real good user experience. And we walked away with an incredible amount of information, and it's up on the MacTech website. It's also in the February issue, and the February issue on iPad as well.
So I gather from the tone of your comments that there's some surprising results here, or something you didn't expect?
Well, the thing that was Parallels has traditionally been the faster of the two, and once again, it was fast. It is astounding, and it was faster than VMware Fusion in most cases, the vast majority of cases overall, especially on things like graphics and some of the operational elements of a virtual machine, starting up and booting up and things like that. It was really quite astounding to see how fast something like Windows 7 or Windows 8 even would run on some of the new machines for Apple, in particular the ones with the SSDs. At the high end, we had a MacBook Pro Retina, fully decked out. It was probably a $3,800 or so spec'd out machine with this big SSD in it. And, to watch Windows boot in under half a minute in a virtual machine is like astounding. And I don't mean just turn on. I mean a full Windows boot from beginning to start up the virtual machine on. And that was astounding to see. So we saw really great speed from Parallels. We saw really very solid speed from VMware Fusion. I strongly believe that people should first look at the feature list, and if one product or the other has a feature set that it's looking for, then that should be where your decision is based. One of those features sometimes is speed, and which one you want to be fastest. And if that's the case, more than likely Parallels is your answer, especially depending on the areas that you're in. And you can take a look at the details of it to make sure that the area that's most important to you is the area that works well. Now, in addition to that, we found that the SSD machines, the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro Retina, are fabulous virtualization experiences. I mean, they really work so well. The battery lasts a very long time. They are super fast. And if you're going to do a lot of virtualization, you really should be on one of the SSD-based machines, even more so than even maybe a Fusion Drive machine. I think the SSDs really rocked there. And then lastly, one of the things that we saw a great deal of was a little bit of ways that you could tweak your virtual machine to make it run faster. So, for example, if you're running either VMware Fusion or Parallels Desktop, the lesser amount of memory that you use, the better. So sometimes if people think, well, more would be better, let's give it 2 gigabytes of virtual memory. It's really better off to if you can stick to 1 or 1.5 to do that, the virtual machine will run faster overall.
Now that I can't let that go by, Neil. That seems to fly in the face of everything every experience we've ever had at least as Mac users. I can't speak as a Windows user, but what's the logic behind that? Do you know?
It's a little bit hard to describe, but basically, here are the things to keep in mind. On a Mac and on the Mac OS, you do have hardware RAM in the machine, but that hardware RAM is used through a virtual memory process where under Unix, under Mac OS 10 or OS 10 these days, you are using a virtual memory model that the more physical RAM you have, the better that virtual memory experience. Windows has similar, kinds of things. And so when you layer Windows on top of virtualization on top of OS 10, you have all these different operations, and then you start to realize that part of for example, starting up and shutting down a virtual machine is loading that into RAM. The less that you have to move around, the better.
Okay. That actually makes a certain amount of sense.
It feels a little abstract, I know.
Yeah, but I had to think about it, but okay, it works. And the SSD thing, I mean, that anybody now that has experienced the SSDs knows that's the way to go. I held out for a while because of the price, but when I've discovered just how much more I can get done, how quickly and how easily, it's money easily spent, well spent.
Yeah, and in the case of virtualization, it made an even bigger difference than what we saw on OS 10. So that's something to keep in mind in there. And that was what we saw, is that, it really was a tremendous experience, and there was just so little lag. And, all of these virtual machine solutions now have so little overhead compared to where they started. Where literally on some of these machines, you might only see a couple % of overhead to the CPU. You could just let them sit there, and it doesn't matter. It's pretty cool.
Neil, who do you think, that's the wrong way to say it, who isn't virtualization for? I mean, because if you have to run Windows software on a Mac or have to run Windows software, this is obviously a great way to do it. Who shouldn't be looking at this? Who should still be looking at a dedicated Windows machine if they have the need?
A gamer that is super, super serious and wants to put serious gaming hardware, graphics cards, and whatnot behind it, either they need to be on like a Mac Pro where they can do that. But really, most of the best games are really on Windows machines, and that's a better experience overall. So if you're a casual gamer, it works just fine. You can also do some stuff in boot camp and whatnot. But if you're really, really serious, you're going to go buy one of those crazy Alienware or one of the other PCs out there to do gaming, and that might be a direction. For most people, from the user point of view, or from even the enterprise point of view, there's lots of vertical market software that's out there. You might have something special in your particular industry, and it only runs on Windows maybe, and everything else runs fine on the Mac. This is a great solution. And with some of these ways that they now have Unity and coherence on VMware Fusion and Parallels Desktop, you can actually just have an Internet Explorer window floating as a window in the middle of all your stuff. It's not even Windows running in a window. It's just the application just runs just like any other Mac window. It just happens to have Windows running on behind it. So it's kind of interesting to see that. And but at the end of the day, it works really, really well for most people. And there's a couple different ways to do virtualization. There's the commercial products, VMware Fusion and Parallels Desktop, which both have support, and there's a lot more to them. There is a open source software with VirtualBox. It's not a great user experience. It's not something that most users should take a look at. It is free, but there's no support, and like I said, the user interface is kind of lacking, and some of the other features are not really there as well, the way they are in the commercial products. And then there's, of course, the non-virtualization method that is through the guys that do Code Weavers, and they've got their tool that's basically a re-implementation of the Windows API, the Windows library, if you will. And there's a lot of pieces of software that work on that, and there's also ones that don't as well. So that's a matter of compatibility and things like that. But you don't need a copy of Windows, real Windows license, in order to do that. So it's a way of looking at things.
Yeah, and as I recall that one too, that had the added advantage of the fact that the program just runs. You don't have a Windows environment supporting it the way you do in, say, coherence mode, where Windows is really running back there. It's just that you're not seeing it.
Yeah.
So
it's the virtualization products for both VMware and Parallels are both very, very good. And like I said, features first, and then if ultimately speed would be next in there, unless speed is the feature you're looking for.
I really like the fact that you advise people to look at the feature sets first. The speed, we all do it. And it's one of the things that, in the processor wars of long ago, we were all looking for the fastest thing. And I think lost sight of the fact that it's really about the performance for what you do, and the fact that there are a couple key features that may just make it a killer on one side, even though it's not the fastest or anywhere near the fastest. It's still the best for you.
Right, and a great example of that. If you look at VMware stuff and you're in the enterprise space, you might want to be able to put VMware Fusion into the whole solution that you have from top to bottom, from high-end hardware in the enterprise on down, and they may want to be managed in some similar way. And that's what VMware Fusion is one of the things that VMware Fusion does such a good job at. By the same token, if you wanted to do, say, Retina support on a MacBook Pro Retina, Parallels does a much better job of that. Much better job, but especially on Windows 8 than VMware does. But really, even on Windows 7, it's a tremendous experience. They both do support it in their own way, but the Parallels support is much more transparent to the user and easier to use as well. So it just, again, depends on your features, depends on who you're trying to go for.
Neil, I realize that this is going to depend on your particular use case, but I'm going to put you on a spot just a little bit. From a Mac user perspective who has, let's call it a casual need, not a dedicated everyday, 4, 5, 6 hours in a Windows environment. Windows 8 worth the upgrade? Should you go the whole way back to XP, which seems to be where a lot of businesses stand? Or?
No. So I don't think anybody should be running XP. Unless there's some specific software reason to be doing that. I think Windows 7 is a much better experience than Windows XP. Certainly a much better experience than Vista as well. And it looks better too. I mean, it just feels better overall. Windows 8, I have to say it took a little getting used to. I kind of like the Metro look that you have on the start screen, but most people, if they're experienced Windows users, they immediately go to look for the start button that would give them the start menu, of somewhere, the Windows button to give you the start menu. It's not there. It does not exist in Windows 8. So either you need to use a third-party utility to kind of bring it back, or you have to learn this kind of new way of doing things, which is through, the start screen as opposed to the start menu. And it takes a little bit of getting used to, but like I said, some of the third-party tools may do it. If you're just, the start screen is nice because you can see kind of all the different things, and most people don't, especially on Windows, don't tend to use that many different applications the way they do on the Mac. You can more easily get to these things. You more visually see what's going on. You see little tidbits of the news and stock tickers and things along those lines. And it is a pleasant interface. The polish on Windows 8 is nice as far as how much better the fonts look and whatnot. And frankly, Retina, a Retina machine running Windows 8 under Parallels looks better than a Windows 8 machine on its own because it's just so much better at display.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay, interesting.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Even though you tried to put me on the spot?
Well, it's not really a case of putting you on the spot. I guess it just seems like we're hearing so much about Windows wanting to push forward the Metro interface.
Yeah.
Or I guess you're not supposed to call it the Metro interface.
Yeah.
And yet you see the articles also about businesses resisting moving forward because of some of the challenges and issues. And I know, talking to you, we're talking specifically about Mac users running a version of Windows in a virtualization software. And I just wonder if there are any particular wisdom or particular thought processes when you're figuring out which version of Windows it is that you're going to be using.
I think if you're a Mac user trying to use Windows and you don't have another version of Windows that you're used to and whatnot using, Windows 8 might be a better experience for you. I think if you're an experienced Windows user and you're trying to have that, make some sense for you, well, then it may be time to stick with Windows 7 and to do that instead. And so it really kind of comes down to whether you're used to the new way of doing things and how that looks or not. But Windows 8, I was surprised at the experience that I had. It was better than I expected it would be. And as a result, I think that just, again, comes down to what are the features that you're looking to do? What do you have available? You might have access to a Windows 8 license and you don't have access to a Windows 7 license. One of the things that people don't realize is that when they buy a machine from, one of the name brand PC vendors, that's an OEM license. That's not a retail license. When that machine goes away, you can't pick up that copy of Windows and use it on a virtual machine or some other machine. You need a retail copy of Windows in order to do that. And not everybody realizes that until after they've made the transition and their 30 days are up, and all of a sudden they have a black screen and they can do nothing with.
Yeah, and now they have to pay the
whatever it is. Yeah,
the cost of the Windows operating system on top of the cost of the virtualization software.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Interesting stuff. Stuff.
But the article is full of screenshots and games that worked and all kinds of graphics tests and speed tests and whatnot. So anybody who's really interested in virtualization performance, if you just go to the MacTech website and search for virtualization or do a Google search for MacTech and virtualization, make sure you have the right year because we've done 6 years of this now, but in the right version. You're looking for the Fusion 5 and Parallels 8, and there's a lot there. There's a lot of information there.
Great. Neil, the second thing I guess we want to make sure we touched on, there's some new certification news out that you all are involved in, and I wanted to ask you to summarize that for everyone.
Yeah, actually might make a little bit of sense. You want to quickly go over the event stuff first, and then we'll do the certification? That might make a little more sense that way?
Sure, that's fine.
So what some people realize is that MacTech's actually long done many types of event things behind the scenes. We used to manage the exhibit fair on behalf of Apple at WWDC for about 10 years. We were the ones that did those large pavilions at Macworld Expo for a number of years, for about a decade as well. And so we've done all these things behind the scenes. But in 2010, we started our own events and our MacTech branded events that capitalized on all this experience we had. And here we are 25 months after our first event, and we have done 22 events across the country in 25 months. And this year we have a total of 10, one of which we've already done. CES has asked us to do a full day of Apple content at their in one of their as a conference track, and now we're have 9 more events that we have this year. 7 of those are MacTech BootCamp, which are for consultants that are serving small to medium-sized business or maybe techs in larger organizations, supporting other people. And then there's, of course, our flagship event, MacTech Conference, which is for IT pros and enterprise and developers. And then we have one MacTech in-depth on network design that's in March in San Jose that we also have this year. So we have, by the end of this year, we'll have done 31 events in just under 3 years, and it's a lot going on. And part of what we've done, and all this stuff, you can check out the schedules and the sessions and stuff on the MacTech website. But one of the things that we have been looking to do is consultants really needed some good Microsoft Office information, but also some accreditations that would help them promote themselves to their clients within their organization, but also we wanted to make sure that people were really using best practices. And the Microsoft landscape for Office is really changing quite a bit right now. And with the changes on not only Office for Mac, but also this move towards Office 365, consultants really need to understand what is the right way to do things, what are the right options for their clients and customers, and whatnot. So we have a short session that's at MacTech BootCamp on Microsoft Office to give them a little bit of stuff. But as we start to discuss stuff more and more with the community and with Microsoft, we realized there really should be a certification or an accreditation, if you will, for consultants that are out there. And so yesterday we announced that we're working with Microsoft to create the Microsoft Office for Mac accredited support professional. And what this is a half-day course, and there's an exam that's at the end of it within that half-day, and it takes place the day before MacTech BootCamp in each of the 7 cities that we're going to this year. And that event is free to MacTech BootCamp attendees. So once they've registered for one, they can just say that they want to go to the other, and we take care of them. There is space limit on these things, so it's certainly first come, first serve. But it's really about making sure that these people understand, best practices, configuration options, some troubleshooting that's there. What are the benefits of one version versus another version, so they can help their clients and support people they're supporting, get the right version of Office for them. And it's really to have them be educated to write them in the right way to make the right decisions.
So Neil, is this? I'm not sure, especially given the idea of Office going virtual now. I'm not quite sure how to say this. Are we talking about network installations? Are we talking about someone who is serious about maybe maintaining their family's versions of Office, that they would walk away from this with a whole lot of knowledge? Who is this for?
It's really for the consultants who support small to medium-sized business and even consumers to some extent, and also techs that are within larger organizations that support users that are running Office that might want to have that additional knowledge. And the kinds of things that we're talking about are not just installation, but what are the Office web apps? What are the do's and the don'ts of the, what do they do well and what do they not do as well? What are best practices in configuration and preferences and settings and use? Maybe, some of the basic things that consultants and support people need to teach users, such as, how to use style sheets. I mean, it's amazing how many people still don't know how to do that kind of thing. But it's also licensing options, cross-platform features, how do you share documents with SkyDrive and SharePoint and more? How do you troubleshoot? What are the common questions? Maybe what are the support resources? If you don't know how to figure out something, what are the things that Microsoft has to offer where you can go find out where that information is? So it's really designed specifically for Apple consultants and techs who are supporting others using Office for Mac and Office for 365. And at the end of the course, we give an exam just to make sure that they've learned something in there. And once that exam happens, they become this Microsoft Office for Mac accredited support professional.
Very nice, very nice.
So, and the response to this has been phenomenal. I mean, people are loving this because it's been really badly needed.
So I have to ask the obvious question: what kind of price is there for this course?
Well, so the course is free to all the people that are registered for MacTech BootCamp. So MacTech BootCamp is normally $499. We're going to give your listeners a link here that they can register for $299 and get a bundled MacTech subscription, which is worth another $50. And if they would like to go to the Microsoft accreditation course as well, they just check a box, and there's no additional cost for that. So that covers basically a day and a half of professional development. We feed people lunch during boot camp. There's sponsors come to the event for our Seattle event coming up. Microsoft is a sponsor, so there'll be a rep there to talk to them, but also Parallels and Drive Savers and SMB Nation and a few other people in there, and plus all of our media partners as well that support us in a variety of ways. So we have a really great experience for these guys, and we couldn't do as many events as we've been doing if people didn't like them. they keep coming back, and they come back as repeats, and we're really pleased with how that's all going. And I can't imagine anybody who's an Apple consultant or tech should be going to one of these events, if for no other reason than the networking opportunities and the opportunities to make relationships with people that they may not have in other places.
We've heard so much about networking and relationships just coming off of Macworld iWorld 2013. There still is a huge component to this. In fact, we hear this from Mike Horton and Dan Berube with the Final Cut Pro Super Meets. Mm-hmm. And it's something we all tend to, I think, overlook in this very social network world, that there's a huge benefit to coming to these events in person, shaking hands with people, sitting down, eating lunch with them, getting to know them. You create relationships, you create opportunities that you just have a hard time creating on Facebook and on Twitter.
Yeah, here's the thing. Facebook and Twitter and email and even Skype and whatnot, I mean, think about it. Part of the reason that you and I have the relationship that we do over these years is because from time to time we get to talk face-to-face and get a good feeling for one another. And, when you do that periodically, you don't need to know what they look like, necessarily anymore in there. I mean, to some extent, you still want to hang out and have those experiences. And so everything that we do with our MacTech event is, yes, the content's great, and the speakers do a phenomenal job, at it. But it's at least as important to have the content, or it's at least as important to have this experience of interaction. as it is to have this great content in this way. And so we need to find ways to do that whenever it's possible. In the case of conference, people come in from literally, I mean, that's an international event, right? I mean, people come from almost all the 50 states and like 15 countries, and they're coming together to a place to join and hang out together for 3 days and learn a lot and talk a lot and meet new people and whatnot. And our boot camps, they're 1 day, so it's a little harder you don't have the 3-day experiences there. It's not as immersive, if you will. But still, you get to break bread with somebody, and there's something to that. Sitting and having a meal with somebody, it forms a bond. And hanging out with people and mingling with them in that way. We tell people, both attendees and sponsors, come, be mingle ready. We treat you as our guest. We feed you. You're there to just interact with each other, and there is nothing like that experience than that in-person experience. And that's why we go to all these different regions and stuff. And I think we were talking before the interview. We really have covered the U.S. with this. This year with Boot Camp, we're going to Seattle, which is coming up really fast here, but also San Francisco and Dallas, Chicago and Boston and Washington, D.C. And those are all cities we've been to before. And we've added one new city, Atlanta, this year, so that we have coverage in the Southeast. And if you think about that map, and you combine that with like our San Jose event for our MacTech in-depth on network design, and our MacTech conference that's in Los Angeles, we've covered the country in pretty much every major region, especially every region of it. And in most cases, even on the regional event, we have people coming from like maybe 10 states in that region. So it really is meant to be a nice pocket in that area.
It's amazing. I think when you first started doing the MacTech boot camps, we talked, and it's like, have you lost your mind? This is a time when conferences and expos and all are allegedly dying, and you were starting these. And I think the reason they've been so successful is you didn't try to overdo them, and you filled a niche that really wasn't being filled, and that was for the more technically oriented developers who needed to get together. And some of the other conferences just didn't present that concentrated an opportunity.
And just to clarify in there, because sometimes we have this funky definition of the word developer in the Apple market. Developer in the Windows market means programmer, right? In our market, it really means anybody technical. Now, we have a lot of programming content. We have some great programming content at MacTech Conference this year, the flagship event in November. But our other events are not for the programmer type. They're not for the hardware technician. They're for the person that is supporting other people, whether they're a consultant or a tech in a larger organization or in a school district or whatever, or somebody who just has a zillion friends that wants to really be educated in a professional way. It's about supporting other people, and that's what boot camp is about, and that's what in-depth is about as well. And it's a little there's actually a whole bunch of programmer events, each in their different ways. Some are iOS and some are Mac and some are all over the world. There's only in the case of the IT stuff, there's Maxis Admin in Sweden, and there's on the educational side, the Penn State administrators event that's coming up here in the fall. But when it comes to kind of the breadth of the country and the large IT event that we have with MacTech Conference, that is something that nobody else is doing, as you said. I hope that makes it a little more clear.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you made the differentiation, because you're right. In this community, developer can mean a lot of different things.
Right.
Neil, where do we send folks to obviously to the MacTech website for the virtualization information? Right. Where do we send them for the MacTech Bootcamp information?
So the easiest thing to do for any of the events is they can go to mactech.com/events, and they can see about conference and in-depth and bootcamp. If they'd like to check out bootcamp specifically, they go to mactech.com/bootcamp. Obviously, no spaces on any of these, and that basically will guide them through to the right places and the schedules and the calendars and everything along those lines.
Terrific. Neil, it's always interesting. Thank you so much for the time. We'll get you back on next time a boot camp's coming up and talk a little bit about what is being offered at that particular event. Yeah,
and we'll see if we can share some knowledge and do some good stuff, and we encourage you to do it. And I'll send you that link so your listeners can get that special offer that's not normally available on the website.
Terrific. I really appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Thanks, Chuck.
Folks, that's Neil Ticktin of MacTech on Mac Voices, the talk of the Mac community. Please join us here on a regular basis. We have all kinds of interesting things, and we have some interesting plans coming up for the future. I hope you'll be part of it. Until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for listening. MacVoicesTV is part of the MacVoices group at MacVoicesGroup.com. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at BackbeatMedia.com.